All right, guys, we've got huge realignment stuff that is absolutely breaking, absolutely critical to get to here on this Sunday. I had my big endgame video yesterday. There's a lot of reaction to it. I want to touch on that. But how about this article? FSU President says Seminoles will be, quote, very aggressive in conference realignment. Florida State's president coming out yesterday and saying, basically, listen, we're going to be aggressive. We know we have a horrible grant of rights deal, and we're going to hire people to try and get out of the grant of rights deal. That's basically what this article says. So, Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina, they know their value is so much higher. With the current grant of rights deal being locked in through 2036, it creates a major elephant in the room that will have to be addressed, and ESPN knows they're going to have to address this one way or another. And then, of course, that goes to the whole endgame prediction. A lot of people wondering, let's say I'm right and the Big Ten does a West Wing. Next you've got the SEC grabbing the 4 teams from the ACC. The one big issue I saw a lot of people have, and it does make sense. Why would it make sense for 4 ACC teams to go to the Big 12? Would the money actually be... Because right now, the Big 12's biggest issue and why it's really not a major player in terms of getting a massive TV deal, they've got no blue blood super teams. That is a big issue when you're going to the negotiation table. You've got no Texas. You've got no Oklahoma. You've got no USC. You've got no Ohio State. You don't have a team that will consistently bring in millions and millions of viewers every single week. That's the Big 12's big issue. So when it comes to the whole realignment, I will say that could be a bottleneck that could hurt the scenario that I laid out yesterday. The one problem, everything else makes sense. It does. The one issue is, will the Big 12 have the money to actually entice the ACC schools, the force, like whether it's Louisville, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, NC State, whatever schools, will they have the money to where a move would make sense? Because remember, the ACC needs 8 schools to agree to dissolve the grant of rights and be able to leave the conference. Obviously, they're easily going to get 4 schools to agree. If 4 schools are guaranteed a spot in the SEC, that makes complete sense. The hurdle is getting to 8 schools and finding those 4 other schools legitimate homes. I know some people are saying maybe the Big Ten doesn't go full West Wing. Maybe the Big Ten takes only Washington and Oregon, and then they also take Virginia and North Carolina. But again, there's so much at play because you would still have the grant of rights issue with the ACC in that situation. That would be only 2 teams leaving the ACC. The issue is we need 8 teams from the ACC to be able to be guaranteed new homes so they could all feel fine and good about dissolving the ACC or dissolving the grant of rights deal, which would effectively destroy the ACC. But this article you can see in July, NoleGameday reported that Florida State is in the process of exploring a move to a new conference. When it comes to rumors like that, honestly, I don't even think I remember that rumor in July. Florida State, I guess every team is. If you're in the ACC, you have to be, especially if you're one of the top teams, you have to be looking around. The Seminoles have had discussions with the SEC and Big Ten since last summer. Both conferences have displayed an interest in adding the university to their group of current members, along with other schools in the ACC. And I would say the SEC would be the major player for Florida State. I think they fit the SEC extremely well. But this is coming from Florida State's president. He says that they're going to be very aggressive. Quote, "It's something I'm spending a lot of time on and we're getting a lot of help. We're trying to do anything we can to think about how we remain competitive. Florida State is expected to win. We're going to be very aggressive. So it does sound like Florida State is open to a move outside of the ACC. Obviously, the Florida State president can't come out and say it. This is a very in-depth situation that's going to take a while to solve due to the grant of rights deal. You can't just say we're leaving when it's such a complicated thing where you need 8 schools total. And again, this is going to be a thing that takes multiple years if the ACC does end up dissolving. The one thing I'm watching for right now when it comes to potential hints on if this actually happens, what happens with the Big 12's TV deal? Does ESPN get the Tier 1 rights to the Big 12? That's really interesting to me. I still maintain the theory that ESPN is getting the 10:30 window for Big 10 games. Like, it makes so much sense. The worldwide leader in sports, they're not going to have any live Big 10 conference football, for the next 10 years. When the Big 10 adds 2 schools, 4 schools, whatever it is from the West, it's going to open up a 10:30 window. It's going to reopen TV negotiations, and that's when I think the Big 10 will say, listen, it's not ideal. We wanted a 7:30 window. We wanted a 3:30 window. We got outbid by NBC and CBS, but let's at least salvage it to where we at least get some form of Big 10 football, and you're talking about the 10:30 window, and maybe you get one big game a year like Penn State at UCLA or Michigan at Oregon. Although it is weird, guys. How are they going to do these 10 o'clock games? Because technically these are conference games, but if you're going to have Rutgers visit Oregon, let's say Oregon's in the Big 10, and the game's at 10:30, all the people that are Rutgers fans, the game is starting at 10:30 at night. Like, would they have Ohio State actually play at 10 o'clock Eastern time? I don't know how that's going to work. I'm guessing it would probably be just lower teams playing at 10:30. I mean, there's certainly other times you can play. Like, you can play at 7:30 West Coast and it's 4:30, in the West. So it's not a big deal, but it is interesting, if there is a 10 o'clock window for the Big 10, I'm really interested to see if ESPN gets those games. How many big games do they actually get for their rights? Remember, ESPN has been obsessed with the 10 o'clock window. They want live football late at night. And they could have a legitimate opening if the Pac-12 dissolves because because the Big 10 wants a West Wing. The Pac-12 dissolves, and now you shift it from the Pac-12 After Dark to the Big 10 After Dark, which is even better for ESPN. It's going to get you even more viewers. That's what I think they want to do. Going back to this article, it says, even with interest from the SEC and Big 10, Florida State is currently hamstrung by the grant of rights deal in the ACC, which isn't set to expire until 2036. In 2013, each president or chancellor signed a deal to surrender their respective schools' media rights to the ACC with an original expiration date of 2027. However, the agreement was extended for 9 more years in 2016 to provide increased television revenue and to get the ACC network launched. Of course, this is another hurdle they're going to have to pass. What happens to the ACC network if these teams want out? I've thought maybe it becomes just the Big 12 network. If ESPN gets Tier 1 rights to the Big 12, it'll be very interesting how that negotiation ends up, because originally, ESPN was not interested in the Big 12 at all. It changes a little bit with ESPN striking out on the Big 10, in my opinion, and we'll see if they can get Tier 1 rights. Also, I mean, we'll see if Fox does anything with the Big 12. I don't think they will. I think they're spending so much money on the Big 10, and then maybe CBS does something with the Big 12, although they just spent $350 million for the Big 10. And then this is just an interesting part of the article. It says they hired somebody with experience in media negotiations and the identification of revenue streams. That's quite coincidental when you consider the position the Seminoles are in, aka Florida State is hiring people, and looking at their legal options to possibly try and get out of this horrific grant of rights deal. Guys, this grant of rights deal will either be renegotiated or it'll be torn up. It's one of the two. There's no way that this is going to stay in place through 2036. So ESPN could throw the ACC a bone, considering they do have the ACC network, and say, listen, under good faith, we're going to give you a better deal. They could try and renegotiate it with the unequal revenue sharing. I think that would kill the conference. I agree. Or they could say, you signed the contract through 2036. It is ironclad. You're not getting out of it. And then you would have some sort of uprising from at least Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, Miami, and then those 4 schools and their presidents would have to try and convince 4 other schools in the ACC to want to get out of that deal. That's my opinion on how that happens, and this is very interesting. It says it won't be easy to wrangle their way out of the grant of rights or exit fee, and it's probably going to take some time either way. It definitely will take time to get out of this deal if they actually do explore it. It looks like with the recent hires, Florida State is interested in trying to circumvent this grant of rights deal through some sort of legal strategy, which doesn't surprise me at all when you look at what other teams are making. But guys, that is the latest. You've got Florida State. The teams we're looking at when it comes to possibly being wanted by the SEC and the Big Ten. I'm looking at Virginia. I'm looking at Florida State. I'm looking at Miami. I'm looking at North Carolina, Clemson. Those would be the main ones. And then you take a look at a team like Georgia Tech, who has the Atlanta market. That's why they would probably be wanted by maybe either the SEC or the Big Ten. And then, of course, I've made the theory that maybe 4 teams go to the Big 12, but there is a money issue there. Certainly there is a money issue because the Big 12 just does not have a super team to carry its conference and make it, wanted in terms of enough TV money. They just don't have the TV money to where it would make sense for a team unless there's unequal revenue that goes into the ACC, because then if that happens, Georgia Tech's going to be making a lot less. Wake Forest is going to be making a lot less. NC State's probably going to be making a lot less. And then you could say if you're those schools, it would make sense for us to leave the conference because at that point, we're going to be even diluted even more with unequal revenue. We would want to leave and head off to another conference, maybe even the Big 12. So there's a lot of things to consider, guys, but the big stuff here, Florida State is actively looking for ways around this grant of rights deal. It's not surprising. I'm sure Clemson's doing it as well. I'm sure Miami, North Carolina are looking into things. They're not going to allow this grant of rights deal to really continue because they're getting just completely screwed. When you look locked in through 2036, it is crazy what is going on here with this, and we will see what ends up happening. Of course, if you are ESPN, if you are members of the ACC, the smaller schools, you could say, listen, you got to suck it up. It's a deal. You agreed to it through 2036. But I think you're looking at schools come together and try and convince each other to get out of such a bad deal. I think that's what would end up happening. And you'd at least have, I'd say, 5 or 6 schools definitely agree to it as long as they had landing spots. The issue is getting 8 schools. I think Louisville probably would agree to it, depending. But again, a lot of this is speculation. So guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.